Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 223, Martha Needle. Warning, there's parts of this episode that you may find distressing. Martha Needle murdered her husband, her 3 young girls, and her new fiancé's brother with poison. A cup of tea would seal her fate. Martha Needle was born Martha Charles on the 9th of April 1863 in Morgan, South Australia. The identity of her parents is ambiguous. Her mother may have been Mary or May Newlands, although some reports indicate that Martha believed Mary to be her stepmother. Martha's father is unknown, since Mary's husband Joseph Henry Charles died in 1861. In 1870, her mother Mary married 39-year-old Daniel Foran and had 2 more children. They lived in a small 2-room house in North Adelaide. Police reports suggest that it was an impoverished, unhappy childhood marred by violence and abuse. Martha's mother was an alcoholic who'd had convictions for drunkenness, indecent language and willful damage. One of Martha's neighbours later gave evidence that Martha's mother used to beat her pretty severely at times, that the neighbour had seen her being hit with a stick, and she told that her mother used to tie her up and hit her with a rope. Martha's stepfather was worse. He was actually jailed for sexually assaulting Martha, who was only 11 at the time, and in the South Australian Advertiser on the 4th of April 1876, it states that Daniel Foran was charged with indecently assaulting his stepdaughter, Martha Charles, at Adelaide in December 1875, found guilty and brought up for sentence. His Honour alluded to the enormity of the crime of which the prisoner had been found guilty and sentenced him to the full term allowed by the Act, which was 2 years with hard labour. She left home at 13, no doubt after a stepfather was released, and started working as a housekeeper, and then she married Henry Needle in 1882 when she was 17. Henry was a short, strongly built carpenter and was 5 years older than her. The couple moved to Sydney so Henry could find work, and it was here that their first child was born, Mabel Hannah, on the 13th of November 1882. On the 6th of October 1884, their second child, Elsie, was born. And around 1885, the couple left for Melbourne and settled in Richmond. Henry had a good income, and the couple was described by neighbours as comfortably situated and well matched. On the 23rd of February 1885, Mabel Needle died after a short illness. Towards the end of 1884, Mabel got sick and was suffering from fever, vomiting and spasms of the stomach. Martha stated that Mabel simply seemed to fade. There was no suspicion surrounding her death. The family doctor, Frederick Elsner, certified that the 3-year-old had died from a congenital cerebral tumour and respiratory and cardiac bronchitis. Martha later collected £100, which in today's money nearly $60,000, life insurance on Mabel's death. After Mabel's death, the marriage seemed to fall into trouble. Henry could not find work locally and he had to travel to Sydney, where he'd stay for several months. Martha began to go out at night alone, and she'd become renowned locally for having a flighty disposition, fond of company, and with a weakness for the admiration of the sterner sex, which was invariably accorded to her. The birth of their third child, May, in 1886 did little to improve the marriage. Henry became increasingly jealous and morose. She was an attractive woman and enjoyed the company of men, and he became a shy, jealous man who often beat her. In 1889, Henry suddenly fell ill. His doctor, George Hodgson, recalled that Henry had been a robust man but was now suffering from acute vomiting. His behaviour was also noted as odd. On one visit, the doctor observed that Henry had left untouched some chicken broth and jelly that Martha had served him. Henry died on the 4th of October with Martha by his side. The official cause of death was subacute hepatitis, persistent vomiting, enteric fever and exhaustion due to obstinacy in not taking nourishment. Despite the mysterious nature and sudden onset of the illness, no post-mortem was performed. No suspicion was attached to Martha, who seemed to give him devoted care. Henry Needle was insured for £200. About a year after Henry's death, 6-year-old Elsie began to fall ill. In the courtroom later, her doctor recalled that he thought Elsie was suffering from measles, but he remembered the young child had been vomiting. The one clear memory the doctor had was of Elsie's appealing mother. He told the courtroom that Martha had never appeared to be inattentive or unkind, and nor had she ever obstructed his attendance. Elsie suffered for 2 months and passed away on the 9th of December 1890. Otto Juncken stated in evidence that when Elsie was ill, I visited frequently, that her mother's manner towards the child could not have been more kind and attentive. When Elsie died, I saw her mother the same night and she was greatly distressed over her death. Only 7 months after the death of her older sister, 4-year-old May's health also deteriorated. The previously healthy child began to display peculiar and worrying symptoms, the most notable constant vomiting. She died on the 27th of August 1891. Her death certificate listed tubercular meningitis as the cause, but her doctor later testified that the case attracted his attention particularly, that he was always puzzled by the case, and he could not arrive at a diagnosis satisfactory to himself. Martha Needle's care of her daughter was not questioned. In fact, she was praised by Otto Juncken by saying Mrs. Needle's conduct towards May could not have been more kind than it was. She seemed to have all a motherly love and affection for her. I saw her after the child died and she was greatly distressed. The doctors were baffled. Her mother placed a death notice in for May in the newspaper. I had 3 little treasures once. They were my love and pride, but one by one they have all gone. They all have early dropped and died. All is dark within my dwelling, lonely my heart today. Now unheard, unpitied, unrelieved, I must bear alone my load of care. Martha spent almost all of the insurance money on an elaborate family grave that she visited regularly. Louis Juncken was a friend from Adelaide, and he operated a saddlery business with his brother Otto in Richmond, and in 1891 Needles sublet the attached house and took in lodgers. Needle began an affair with Otto in 1893 and they became engaged. During this time, Martha's behaviour began to cause concern, particularly to Otto's brother Louis. She would become unresponsive or rigid for long periods, and on at least one occasion she went out to search for her dead children, walking the streets in only a skirt. Louis became concerned and opposed the engagement. The following year, on the 25th of April 1894, Louis became ill, with symptoms such as vomiting, a sore mouth and gums, and a sore tongue. He died on the 15th of May of suspected typhoid. His brother Otto recalls at the trial, I remember Louis getting ill. He suffered from vomiting and sore mouth and tongue and sore gums. Mrs. Needle was attending him and myself. She prepared the food and gave the medicine. In June 1894, Herman travelled to Melbourne from Adelaide to handle his late brother's affairs. He ate a meal prepared by Martha and suddenly became ill. He recovered but became ill again the next day after eating breakfast. 2 days later, Herman had fully recovered, but while eating a lunch prepared by Martha, he was seized by painful, violent cramps. Dr. Boyd treated Herman for a suspected poisoning and took a sample of Herman's vomit and sent it to the government laboratory for analysis. The analyst reported that the sample contained arsenic coloured by charcoal, similar to the constituents of a popular rat poison, rough on rats. Boyd informed the police of his suspicions and a trap was set. The police asked Herman to ask Martha to make lunch. After being served a cup of tea, Herman blew the whistle. He summoned detectives who had hidden outside the Juncken house and arrived as Martha was struggling with Herman to upset the teacup, which was found to contain arsenic to kill 5 people, that is 10 grains. A box of rough on rats was found in the cupboard. Martha was charged with attempted murder. The body of Louis Juncken, it was exhumed and samples sent to Melbourne. The bodies of Henry Needle and the 3 girls that were interred in Kew were also exhumed. All 5 bodies were found to contain fatal levels of arsenic, and Martha was charged with the murder of Louis Juncken. In her defence, her counsel attempted to argue that Martha's long periods of unconsciousness meant that she was not responsible for her actions. The murder of her children seemed especially inconsistent with her apparent behaviour as a fond mother. Again, with evidence of Otto Juncken that he made in 1894, I noticed she was subject to fits or faints. They would occur at any time, the fits came without warning, and she would suddenly fall right down as if she was struck. She would be quite unconscious. But doctors called to give evidence were reluctant to commit themselves, and Justice Hodges rejected the plea of insanity, observing that the law cannot wait while philosophers, physicians and scientists settle metaphysical problems. Justice must be swift and sure. Martha's contradictory character and motivations were possibly caused by her traumatic childhood, which illuminated the gradual deterioration of her mental state. She also experienced years of severe headaches and delirium as a result of typhoid fever. An examination of her behaviour revealed a woman with a volatile and unpredictable temper, prone to fits, auditory and visual hallucinations, and lengthy periods of confusion. Martha's psychiatric instability was further intensified by an alleged addiction to a readily available concoction of laudanum, morphine hydrochloride, cannabis, and chloroform. Although those close to Martha described her as an attentive mother and wife. During the trial, one witness claimed, "The children were nicely, cleanly and tenderly kept. I could not say I ever saw children kept more nicely. I never saw any unkindness." And yet needles slowly poisoned those that she loved. In The Age, on the 28th of September 1894, the Richmond poison case, Martha Needle convicted. The trial of Martha Needle on a charge of having murdered Louis Junkin at Richmond was concluded in the criminal court yesterday before Justice Hodges and a jury of 12. His Honour, after a few remarks, said the jury must remember that the prisoner was being tried for the murder of Louis Junkin only. The facts relating to the cases of Herman Junkin and the Needles were only referred to in order to enable the jury to say whether or not Louis died from poison and whether it was administered intentionally or accidentally. The prisoner seemed to have been deeply attached to Otto Junkin in April 1893, as was shown by the impassioned letter which she wrote to him. He urged her not to commit self-destruction, and he also entered into an engagement to marry her. Otto, in giving evidence against the woman he loved, had conducted himself in a way that inspired absolute confidence in his Honour's mind, as his demeanour was manly, noble and generous to a degree. It appeared that the prisoner suspected a coolness toward her on the part of Louis, who it seemed wished to prevent the marriage, and if she were a person who held human life lightly, this might have been a motive for the alleged crime. The Crown said that Louis Junkin died from arsenic poisoning, and the defence, from what he could gather, was that this allegation had not been proved. Dr. McColl was of the opinion that Louis had Rigg's disease, but nothing was done until the 30th of April when Mrs. Jones came to nurse him. She left on the 8th of May, and now came the part in which the Crown took up a decided position. The Crown said that on the evening of the 10th of May, just after an improvement took place, the prisoner purchased a box containing arsenious acid known as rough on rats. On the day afterwards, Louis Junkin became worse again, and on the 12th of May he had died. In consequence of something which took place after his death, suspicion was aroused and the body was exhumed and a portion of it analysed. What could be certain was that Mr. Blackett had found arsenious acid in the body, in the stomach and in the intestines, and according to modern medical opinion, arsenic was no part of the human body, and Junkin had taken no medicine so far as they knew with arsenic in it. So the Crown said, "Here is found in the body of Louis Junkin arsenious acid, and there is found in the possession of the prisoner arsenious acid." They said that the prisoner attended on him, and consequently it was reasonable to suppose that she administered it, that there was no other hand from which he could have received the arsenious acid. The jury had to be satisfied that the prisoner administered the poison and intentionally administered it. One might suppose and probably believe that if great care was not exercised in cleaning a spoon, a knife or another article that might have been used, the poison might innocently have gotten into the stomach. Then the Crown said they would show that Henry Needle had arsenious acid in his body, that Elsie and May Needle had arsenious acid in their bodies, and that the symptoms were similar. Henry Needle died in October 1889 and his body was exhumed this year and arsenious acid was found in it. The doctors who attended him said the patient had pain over the abdomen and persistent vomiting. With regard to Elsie, the evidence was somewhat weaker. The evidence of arsenic and vomiting was less clear. Only a small trace was found in the body. However, the doctors said the vomiting was her chief symptom and it was constant. He said if poison was found in her body, he'd have no hesitation in saying that the death was caused by poison. Now His Honour came to a part in the case regarding Herman Junkin. Herman told Martha it would be better that she and Otto should not live in the same house. She not unnaturally resented this suggestion. Up to that time, Herman seemed to have been regarded as a friend. He'd partaken of meals prepared by her, and there had been no symptoms. The morning afterwards, though, he seized immediately after breakfast with vomiting. He had eaten that morning some fried eggs, which his brother had cooked, and breakfast was given to him by the prisoner. He went to Mrs. Smith's and remained there on the 6th and 7th of May, and the vomiting had ceased. He then returned to the prisoners on the 8th at 12 o'clock and had some tea, bread and butter. He was ill again and vomited. He went back to Mrs. Smith's and saw a doctor, who at this time appeared to have some suspicion aroused. The doctor gave a sample to Mr. Blackett, and, once examined, traces of arsenic were found. With suspicion thoroughly aroused, the detectives suggested that Herman would go to the prisoner's house on the 13th, and when she asked him if he would have lunch, he would accept, and she prepared tea. The detectives then came in, and the tea poured out for Herman was placed in one vessel, while the tea she poured out for herself was placed in another. They were analysed, and the cup for which the prisoner was drinking, there was no poison found, but in the cup handed to Herman was 10.5 grams of arsenic. The jury had to weigh all these facts, and the facts satisfied them that Louis Junkin died in consequences of arsenic acid in his system, and that the arsenious acid was administered by the prisoner, and that she intended to do so. The jury deliberated for 3/4 of an hour, returned into court, and found the prisoner guilty of murder. On the prisoner being asked in the usual manner whether she had anything to say, she said in a low but firm voice, "I am not guilty. It is undeserved. I am not guilty of this charge." His Honour, in passing the sentence of death, said, "Martha Needle, it is not my intention to keep you one moment in suspense. If conscience is not already doing its work, nothing I can say will have any effect. It is my duty only to pronounce the sentence of the court." The prisoner, who went through the terrible ordeal with great courage, was then removed. The trial lasted 3 days, and Martha was given no recommendation to mercy. Despite the evidence, Otto Junkin insisted that she didn't realise what she had done, and he supported her until the end. A few days after Martha's trial had ended, lawyer Marshall Lyle wrote to the Governor, the Earl of Hopetoun, on behalf of the Victorian branch of the Howard Association for the Prevention of Crime. Lyle conceded that Needle had committed acts utterly revolting and opposed to the natural instincts of women, and she'd murdered her children, whom she loved very much and treated affectionately. But he argued it was only rational to assume that when a kind mother murders her children, she is insane. Lyle advocated for a proper scientific inquiry of Needle's case, rather than the Crown's use of incompetent medical men. He questioned the jail doctor's test of Needle's sanity, which consisted of a cross-examination into her knowledge of the 10 Commandments of Moses. Lord Hopetoun referred the letter to the Government Attorney-General, Isaac Isaacs, and replied, "As the prisoner was defended by able counsel, and as this petition does not disclose any facts which would show that the woman was insane, I do not see any reason to recommend that the request be complied with." During her time in jail, Martha received continued visits from her friends. In her final letter she wrote to her friend Mrs. Owen, she says, "Try not to grieve too much for me." Martha Needle was executed at 8 a.m. on the 22nd of October 1894. When asked for her last words, she replied, "I have nothing to say." Her execution was outlined in the Melbourne Age on the 23rd of October 1894. The last scene in the tragedy, known as the Richmond poisoning case, was enacted yesterday morning, with Martha Needle sentenced to death by Justice Hodges on the 28th of September for the murder by arsenical poisoning of Louis Junkin. She was executed in the Melbourne jail. At 10 o'clock, the Sheriff of Melbourne proceeded to a cell adjoining the scaffold and produced the warrant for the execution, demanding the body of the prisoner. The condemned woman came on the scaffold, supported by 2 warders and attended by Reverend Scott. The Sheriff asked her whether she wished to make any statement, and she replied in a low but firm voice, perfectly audible to the few persons whose duties compelled them to be present, "I have nothing to say, thank you, sir." She walked to the centre of the drop, apparently without need of assistance. The executioner quickly adjusted the rope, and in less than 2 seconds the lever was pulled, the drop fell, and the last penalty of the law had been enacted. Mrs. Needle maintained an impenetrable demeanour to the last, and although she listened respectfully to the exhortations of Reverend Scott and evidently appreciated the kindly ministrations of Mrs. Hutchinson and Sister Esther, she asserted her complete innocence of the crime for which she was about to suffer, up to within a few minutes of her execution. The property of the deceased included her furniture and an insurance policy for £25 that was willed to Otto Juncken, brother of the man for whose death she suffered the extreme penalty of the law. Otto Juncken called at the jail this afternoon. He seemed deeply grieved. He occupies the same room in the house at Richmond that he did before the tragedy was committed. He is highly spoken of by his employer. Below is a letter written by Martha to Otto, penned a few hours before her execution, which he received the next day. Melbourne Jail, Monday, 4 o'clock. My darling, as you wish me to write, I will do so, but truly I do not know what to say to you on this last morning on earth. In a few hours I shall be free from all sorrow, but you, dear Otto, must live on. It may be a very long time or it may not, but whichever way God wishes it be. But never mind, try to bear up under this very sad blow. Rest assured we will meet again where there is no parting. Your good father, also Paul, Louis and my dear little ones will welcome you. You know, dear Elsie and May loved you on earth, they will do so in heaven. Think how they will all welcome you to our happy home on high. I must ask you to not think unkindly of me for saying what I did last night to Mr. Scott. I think it right that you should know what that man did say about you, but I want you to thoroughly understand that I did not believe that you ever did say so to him, and I told him so. You must not think what he said upset me, for it did not, only it annoyed me to think that such a man would tell an untruth. True, he may think he was doing right, we must hope he did think so. Now you will want to know what sort of a night I have had. Fairly good. You and all dear ones have been in my thoughts and prayers, dear Otto. Please read the 139th Psalm from the 7th to the 13th verse, as I have asked God to forgive me anything that I have done to displease him, and trust to his forgiveness. So do I forgive all that have ever done me any sort of unkindness. For I know that they are very sorry now for me, be the wrong little or big. Give my everlasting love to all inquiring friends. I must now say goodbye to you for a time. When you receive this, you can think of me as being in a happy home with my loved ones waiting and watching for you. I know, dear Otto, that you will get ready for that happy meeting with us all. With love and sympathy from your loving Martha. Martha Needle was the third of 4 women hanged in the old Melbourne jail, and her death mask can be seen today. During the Great Depression, the Brighton City Council built bluestone walls to protect local beaches from erosion. The stones were taken from the outer walls of the old Melbourne jail, and this included the headstones that had the initials of prisoners and their date of execution, of all of those executed and buried on the grounds. Although most were placed with the engravings facing inwards, Martha Needle's stone was facing outwards, and the initials MN and the date are still clearly visible in the Green Point wall. Over time, sand drifts buried her headstone until its location was rediscovered near Wellington Street. And on the 18th of September 1949 in the Sydney Truth, there's a recollection article, Strange Case of Martha Needle, the history of Australian crime records, no more weird case than that of Martha Needle, poisoner and poet. A deeply religious woman, in 1894 Martha poisoned her husband, children and brother of her lover and was executed in Melbourne jail. Martha was an attractive woman, petite, only 5'2" in height. She had brown curly hair, hazel eyes and a fresh complexion. Her manners were pleasing, and on her face she wore a mild and kindly look. However, she was a cold-blooded killer and a consummate liar. She protested her innocence to the last, although convincing evidence was given in her presence that she had poisoned her husband, her 2 children and 2 of her boarders. All these except one boarder died. The attempt on the other boarder caused a suspicion which led to her conviction and execution. This extraordinary woman was born in South Australia in 1864 and married Henry Needle, a carpenter, in 1883. She had 2 children, Elsie and May, and they came to live in Victoria in 1885, taking up their residence in Wellington Parade, East Melbourne. The same year she made the acquaintance of Louis, Herman and Otto Juncken, with whom she became very friendly. To what degree of intimacy extended in respect to any or all of these brothers, nothing definite can be stated, but in 1889 her husband, apparently a strong and healthy man, died at the age of 30, and subsequent developments would make it seem that he had been got out of the way in order to enable Mrs. Needle to marry Otto, whom she besought to make her an honest woman. At this time the Junckens kept a shop in Bridge Road, Richmond, and in 1891 Mrs. Needle went to live with them as a housekeeper, taking little May, with Elsie having died in 1890. Louis and Otto Juncken became rivals for Mrs. Needle's affections, but she preferred Otto. In 1891, the child May also died, and Mrs. Needle, who was not in good health, constantly lamented the deaths of her two children. Otto was greatly impressed with the maternal affection she displayed, although she never expressed any regret at the death of her husband. Evidently, Otto's wooing was too slow, for in Easter in 1892, on returning from a trip to Healesville with his brother, Otto found a letter from the widow which began "Dear Otto" and was very affectionate but despondent in terms. The letter concluded, "If my body is found, let me be buried with my children." Shortly after the receipt of this letter, Otto proposed marriage, but his brother Louis strongly objected, giving as a reason Mrs. Needle's violent outbursts of temper. Otto's mother also objected, and Otto declared that he would not marry without his parents' consent. This caused family friction, which lasted till August 1893, when the first of a series of mysterious sicknesses attacked Louis. He was a strong young man, but on the date named he was seized by severe bouts of vomiting. Poisoning was not suspected. On the 19th of April 1894, Louis had a recurrence of illness and went to bed. On the 30th of April, his sister, Mrs. Jones, came to nurse him and remained until the 8th of May, when he was sufficiently recovered to get up. On the evening of the 10th of May, Mrs. Needle bought some rough-on rats at a chemist shop in Richmond. The next morning she got Louis's breakfast, and he again became violently sick. He grew worse and died. A few days after this, Herman Juncken returned from a visit to Adelaide, bringing with him his mother, who seemed to have annoyed Mrs. Needle. Mrs. Needle wrote to Otto as follows: "Why did your wicked mother come over here to make us more unhappy than before? And if she is the good loving mother you think she is, why did she not come and see Louis before he died? It is a wonder you and she are not afraid God will strike you dead when you are plotting my ruin. If you are an honourable man, you should wish to make me an honourable woman. But no, a man like you, who have had your turn, don't care, and I can be cast aside. But remember this, the day you cast me off for your mother, you will be motherless. I shall kill her, if I have to walk from here to South Australia to do so. I have vowed to my God to do this, and I shall keep my vow. Your cast-off landlady." Herman objected to Otto living with Mrs. Needle, as it would be a scandal, and this infuriated Mrs. Needle, and she determined to be revenged. Her husband had been removed because he stood between her and her fancy man, Louis Juncken, because he objected to her marriage with Otto, and so she determined to attack Herman for the same reason. It was at this time Mrs. Needle was still housekeeping for the Junckens, and one morning, shortly after Herman raised his protest against Otto living in the same house with the widow, he was seized with a violent attack of vomiting. Mrs. Needle suggested he went to bed. A short time later, she took him a cup of tea, and he was again sick. He then consulted Dr. Boyd, who suspected poisoning. He returned home, and Mrs. Needle gave him another cup of tea, in which he vomited again. He saw the doctor again and was advised to inform the police and to keep any further vomit for analysis. Herman went back to the house with the understanding that he was to accept a cup of tea if Mrs. Needle offered it. Needle was prompt with the offer of tea, which was handed to the police and found to contain poisoning, and she was then arrested. Her other family members were exhumed and their bodies tested. Otto Juncken in the trial said that it appeared that Martha often looked like she was walking in her sleep, and she behaved strangely. In the trial, Mrs. Needle demonstrated the truth of this statement by taking fits in the dock which lasted 5 hours. It was of cataleptic character and was a form of masked epilepsy. In her fit, she would repeat conversations with her husband and hold up a hand as if warding off a blow. Otto said she was certain that she never realised that she was guilty of the diabolical murder of her children. But then Otto was her lover and was loyal to the last. She was of suicidal tendencies and tried to get hold of poison to do away with herself just before her arrest. To the governor of the jail she said, "If I had been condemned to imprisonment for life, I would not have stood it long, as I would have soon poisoned myself." In the time that the jury retired, the prisoner was chatting and laughing brightly with the female warders that attended to her. When the judge handed his sentence, Martha Needle remained cool and composed the whole time the judge was speaking, and when the wardress moved to sustain her, she smiled and said, "I am all right, thank you, let me alone." On the way to the jail, however, she completely broke down and sobbed with her face buried in her hands. In her condemned cell, she sang hymns and recited psalms continuously, and did not cease to hope that she would meet her children in heaven. She retained her affection for Otto to the last, and to him wrote just before she was hanged the following lines: Farewell, faithful one, I must now bid adieu to the joys and pleasures I have tasted with you. We laboured together united in heart, but now I must leave you and soon we must part. My labours are over and I must be gone, but I leave you, not friendless, to struggle alone. Be watchful and prayerful and Jesus will stay. Cleave close to your Saviour, let him lead the way. Farewell, dear one, and time now with you. My heart sinks within me at bidding you adieu. One step back or forward will settle my doom, mid the glories of heaven or return its gloom. Farewell, my dear one, I now go away, no more to meet you till the great judgment day. Though absent in body, I'm with you in prayer, and we'll meet in heaven, there's no parting there. From your loving Martha. In more recent years, Martha has been the subject of some books, two of those particularly Martha Needle, The Spellbinding Story of Australia's Most Infamous Femme Fatale from Brian Williams, which was written in 2018, and The Secret Art of Poisoning, The True Crimes of Martha Needle, the Richmond Poisoner, written by Dr. Samantha Battams in 2019. Her story was also once even performed as a play that was entitled The Eye of Martha Needle. Alexander Lee, Martha's nephew, poisoned his wife and 3 of his children with strychnine in 1920. Interestingly, both his aunt and him were 31 years old when they committed their acts. They were charged, convicted and executed for their respective crimes, which was separated by a span of 26 years. And I have created a bonus episode number 40, on Alexander Lee. If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast, Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.